Hi there. Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast with me, Russell Davis. I'm taking some time off over Christmas and New Year, so in January we're exploring some episodes from the archive. This week's one is from November 23, and it's about looking at the difference between a lack mentality and an abundance mentality. Often when we lack mentality, we have a sense of lack of time, energy, money, worthiness. How do you switch that way of thinking of the world and yourself from a place of lack to a place of abundance? Well, let's dive in and find out. Sometimes going through a really challenging time in life or crisis can be a gift in some way, because it can help you explore our outlook on life. It wasn't until our infertility journey when I started to really question whether I'd ever be happy. So I explore kind of what makes us happy, where does happiness come from, and what was stopping me being happy. It was in that kind of period that prompted my own kind of psychological journey, what led me to getting my own kind of therapy and coaching, and ultimately leading to my changing career and doing what I do now. But one of the things that came to light, and it was really obvious when I noticed it, I couldn't believe I didn't see it before, was this sense of lack mentality. Well, there were either one or two kind of mind states, lack or abundance. And a lack mentality can show up in various forms. It can be a lack of money, time, energy, love. And for me, it was showing up in a number of ways. So, for example, lack of money, even though I was in a very well-paid job. We had no money worries. Prospects looked good, a very successful career, and nothing to say it was going to continue. Very large, relatively safe kind of job, organisation, wasn't going to go under in any risk of financial trouble. So in many respects, we didn't have kind of money worries. Both working, no kids, we had lots of savings. But still, it was easy to look back afterwards. But at the time, I couldn't see how I was almost like I was hoarding. And I was reluctant to spend money myself, particularly reluctant to spend money on something fun. And unconsciously, there was a fear behind that, a fear of running out of money, a fear of perhaps losing my job, all these kind of worst case scenarios running through my head. Ultimately, a fear of dying homeless alone on the streets. Not being aware that these unconscious stories, this narrative, was contaminating my relationship with money and seeing things with greater clarity and perspective. With time, I had this kind of lack of time, and it's going to still show up from time to time, me rushing from one thing to another, with a sense of not having enough time. A common or habitual story is, I don't have enough time. It happened this morning. When realistically I did have time, but I was telling myself I had all these things I needed to do before my first call. And reality is I had plenty of time, and those things didn't have to happen then. So it's a habit of thinking I don't have enough time. For example, I used to be, not so much now, but I used to be stuck in traffic jams and get really frustrated that I was going to be late and didn't have enough time, even though 9 times out of 100 I was still on time, because I'd left plenty of time. So again, that's our story, that's our narrative. And love. We can have this kind of narrative, the story of not having enough love, and that shows up from time to time despite being married 25 years. There can be a sense of fear of loss of love, fear of being rejected, which can manifest itself in some neediness, and neediness is not an attractive quality in a relationship. So this lack mentality can manifest itself in a number of areas of our life. But what's behind it, I think, is all the same core thing. It's questioning where our sense of well-being comes from. Because if we think our security, lovability, worthiness, okayness comes from the outside world, if we think our security does come from enough money coming in each month, or a particular amount of money coming each month, then we're looking in the wrong place for that sense of security. We never get there. There's always going to be a lack. I once met one of the most anxious men I've ever met, and he owned a small business. It was a shop. And he said to me, but I can stop worrying. I can be okay when I've got £250,000 in the bank, saved in the bank in the business. And then I can have any unexpected eventuality is covered, whether it's an unexpected kind of tax bill or something else. And I said, has it always been that figure? He said, I know, when I started the business, it was 50,000, then it was 100,000, 150. I said, so has the business grown over that time? He said, no, it's the same business. And it's an example where when we're looking in the wrong place for happiness and security, we never actually get it. There's always something else. There's always something else. Because we're looking in the wrong place. When happiness, security are a feeling, they come from within. It's the narrative, it's our perception of ourselves and life that creates our experience, that creates our emotions, not life itself. It's our perception, it's the story, it's our thinking about it. And that comes from within. And when we realize we have everything within us, it's okay to want things on the outside. We don't need them to be happy. Happiness comes from being present in our life to the moment. We have innate happiness. We have an innate feeling of security. Toddlers don't question their happiness or whether they're emotionally and physically secure. They're just being. They're just being. They just assume they're okay. That's our default setting. It may not be our habitual setting as an adult, but it's actually our default setting. This touches on another aspect of life about the energy of life. I've used this quote before that Einstein once said the biggest question humanity needs to ask is whether this universe is safe or not. And I don't believe he meant physically safe, as in there could be aliens out there going to attack us. I think he meant psychologically safe. There's a very famous psychological experiment that often gets quoted called the marshmallow test, where psychologists gave these children kind of marshmallows and said, you can have this marshmallow now, but if you wait until I come back in a little while later, another one, then you can have two. But if you eat that one now, you won't get the second one when I come back later. And it was to explore, at the time they were looking at kind of delayed gratification and that kind of willpower. And that study went on to look at these kids beyond that age and look at older and later in life. And they concluded those kids that had willpower and held on to the marshmallow without eating it and waiting till they had two, generally were more successful in SATs results, exam results at school and in life, were deemed to be more successful. And they put it down to this thing called willpower. But it's interesting, psychologists more recently have looked at that study. It's a very famous study, it gets quoted an awful lot. And they realized the children in that study were all from the same social and economic group, quite upper middle class, I think they were. And she had worked with kids from very, very poor backgrounds who didn't have anything. And she could say that they had a different relationship with things they were given. So she repeated the experiment. But she had a group of children, and there was a teacher or someone running the experiment, and the children were colouring, and they said, here's some crayons to colour with, but if you wait, I'm going to come back with some lovely new felt tips. You can use those instead if you want to wait for those, or you can use the crayons now. And with one group, the teacher came back with the felt tips, and they used the felt tips. With the other group, the teacher didn't come back with the felt tips. She said she would, but she didn't. She came back with some reason to excuse, I didn't have them, I thought I had them. And then they did the marshmallow test after that. So one group, they'd impose this idea that the universe kind of provides, and the other, they kind of inferred that you can't trust the universe or this teacher or this environment to provide. And if you inherently think you're not going to get, the second marshmallow, well, you're going to eat the first marshmallow. You're not going to bother waiting. If you inherently can trust you're going to get the second one, you're more likely to wait and have the second one and have two. So it's not just kind of willpower, it's our perception of life as a whole. I grew up in an environment, an Anglo-Catholic environment, that talks about a God of unconditional love. But all I could see were these conditions. They talked about judgment a lot, repentance a lot. And my mum is ultra strict, and love felt quite conditional growing up, that if I behaved in the way that pleased her, that I felt more loved. If I didn't, I got shouted at, so thus I didn't feel very loved. So love felt very conditional growing up. So the idea of an energy behind life being unconditional love felt like a very alien concept, a very attractive concept. I wanted to experience that, but it wasn't something I could really trust or relax into. It took me a while to consider that as a possibility and allow myself to trust that and to explore that. And I think that's ultimately our source of abundance. We realize actually we live in an abundant world. There isn't a finite amount of money. They're printing money every day. There's not a finite amount of love or energy, even time. When we look at things from an abundant place, I come back to time because it can be quite confusing. Yeah, sure enough, time is ticking by, and we only have a finite amount of time on this universe, on this planet as a human. At some point, we are going to die. We need to accept that. But we see that there is an energy behind life that's loving and creative, and it's an abundant sense of love. When we realize, I believe we're made of it, we're part of it. And we see that as our source of everything we need: well-being, wisdom, happiness, peace. When we have a quiet mind, I believe we innately plug into that energy of life that flows through us. It's that kind of God within us, if you want to use a kind of Christian terminology. But I don't believe that energy of life kind of judges us. I think it's an unconditional love, and sometimes we have misunderstandings, sometimes we see things in confusing ways. But it's an energy of love, unconditional love, like the most perfect parent you can imagine. That perfect parent exists, and parents in this physical world have human stuff. We have contaminated thinking that kind of interferes with how we show up at times. So if we can see love, money, energy, time from a place of abundance, it can dramatically shift our relationship with those things and our relationship with ourselves. So for example, if you see an unconditional relationship with love, then you won't fear being rejected. When you realize you are love, you're love in human form, you are that energy of love in human form, you don't fear rejection because you are love. You are love, and the more I relax into that, the more I can show up with more full presence and more loving being. I can be more loving presence to the people around me. I don't have this fear and neediness that contaminates the way I show up. I have more loving patience, loving kindness. There's less fear to contaminate that experience. When you see money from a place of abundance, I realised my relationship with money was, I think money is a fascinating subject. I think not just my relationship, I think our relationship with money is an external representation of our relationship with ourselves. And I earned a good salary, but still didn't feel enough. I didn't feel rich. I didn't feel kind of wealthy, not particularly rich or wealthy, but I still felt poor. I still lived kind of a very simple life, scared of spending kind of money. So the feeling of security comes from within us. And when I started being self-employed, I could clearly see a correlation between what I earned and how I felt about myself. When I didn't feel good enough, we struggled to have enough. When I felt enough, we had just enough because I felt just enough. And the more I can relax and lean into my worthiness, the more abundance we had, and the more abundance I felt. So I think there's a direct correlation between our relationship with money and our relationship with ourselves, and how enough and worthy we feel. Time, I realised when I realised there's a sense of, this was related to two things for me. Realising my fear of not having enough time was related to two things. One was actually not enough love. Actually, it's a fear of rejection. I might be scared I'll be late for a meeting and then someone would judge me negatively in some way. The people pleaser on me, which is based upon fear. Really wanted to make sure I was on time, I wouldn't upset someone by being late. The more I realised that I didn't have to be scared of that. I didn't have to be so worried about being late. It doesn't mean I am late all the time. I have a standard of being on time. I like being on time. It's important to me. But I have less worry and fear around that, because I just trust when things happen in life, the best planning ever, sometimes you might be late, and that's okay. I'm no less of a lovable, worthy human being. Another thing about time is realising that when we realise as spiritual beings having a physical experience, there are two ways of considering time, thinking about time. The Newtonian, from a physics point of view, Newtonian view of time is fixed. It's absolute, it's fixed, it's linear. The Einsteinian view of time is actually, it's relative. That's why sometimes time feels like it's going really quickly, and sometimes it feels like it's going really slowly, because it's relative. And I could see that. When I was stuck in a traffic jam, I played with that in the past. I think time's going really quickly, I'm going to be late. I imagine being late. When I allow myself to relax, I've got plenty of time. I am time. Just like we are love in human form, we are energy in human form. Time is a form of energy. What if I am time? I have enough time because I am time. I began to relax and trust it's okay. Again, 9 times out of 100, I was there on time. Began to explore and play with my relationship with time, rather than having this lack. What if I am time? I have plenty of time. And guess what? My mind slows down. I become more present. I have a clearer mind. I get things done quicker and easier. I tend to have more time. So we either have a lack mentality or an abundant mentality. And what's behind lack mentality? Often judgment. Judgment of ourselves, either not worthy, not good enough, I don't deserve. One of mine was, who am I to be almost happy? Growing up, there's a lot of sadness. I didn't believe I was allowed to be happy. Who am I to be wealthy? Who am I to be happy? Who am I to be loved? There's a lack of worthiness or deserving. So if you have the sense of lack mentality in life, and particularly over life, consider what the story is behind that. What's the judgment of yourself behind that lack mentality? Then forgive yourself for that judgment. And sometimes we can see how these will be shaped by childhood experiences, but the past doesn't exist. These judgments only exist by us in the moment. We are continuing those stories out of habit. We've internalized them out of habit. Well, if we can forgive ourselves for those judgments, those stories, that allows us to free ourselves from the old story and step into the new story of abundance. I believe we are loving energy of life in human form. I believe you are love in human form. You are abundance in human form. Loving you.